I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so excited to be joined by the wonderful Melissa Fumero to talk all about Grosse Pointe Garden Society. And one of the things I was really interested in to start off was your audition process for this, because I know that you initially actually auditioned for the role of Catherine and kind of found that character to be a little bit more in the wheelhouse of characters that you've played before. And so I was interested in what it was then like to step back into the audition room for Birdie and really look at the story from a different perspective for yourself.
Yeah, I think they were very gracious to kind of at first just be like, well, which role do you want to audition for? And so I was definitely intimidated by Birdie, even though I kind of knew that was probably who they wanted me to audition for, but they were being really nice. And so yeah, Catherine felt a little bit closer to other characters I played, and so I did it and it went well, but they were like, yeah, let's see Birdie. And it took me a minute. I felt like obviously she's an incredibly interesting character and has this really interesting duality that we see a little less in the first episode. But I was like, oh man, like I didn't want her to feel like a caricature because she's such a big character. And so I struggled to kind of figure out how do I make this kind of larger than life character feel like a real person. And I've given my husband David credit for this. He reminded me of a character I did so long ago on this little web series that nobody saw. And he said, "Well, she's kind of like that. Like that's the same lane. Maybe just start there." And it just kind of broke it open for me. And I was like, "Yeah, I've met women like this, and it's I think there's a mask kind of thing, a self-protection thing that's happening here with her." And so that just kind of opened it up, and I sort of found my way in. And I think I started with just like I tend to work from a really physical place too. So it was like, how does she carry herself? How is this, persona she puts on? It's not really who she is. Um, and kind of getting into a little bit, I think, of that duality. And then I started to see it and it started to make sense to me a bit. And so then I went for it. And they liked it. And Bill Krebs, our showrunner, actually just told me recently that I was the reason I won the role was I was the first actor to play her like a real person. And that, I think I kind of was able to narrow in on like the trap with this character was to play this like, you know, caricature a little bit, and so luckily I, kind of figured it out and grounded her in a way that I guess no one else did necessarily, and that's what helped me get it.
I mean, it feels like the grounded element that you were just mentioning really comes from that duality that you were describing, where there are these two very different sides to her, and you kind of really get to gradually see underneath episode by episode. And I've heard you also describe how one of the early scenes with her son Ford kind of really opened up the character for you. And how did looking at those scenes, because I feel like that's such a crucial relationship to her, really kind of like open up that other side of her for you?
Yeah, well, it's like figuring out what the motivation is for why she says the things she says and why she acts the way she does. And with Ford, when I read that scene, I just remember thinking like, oh God, she's just really lost and lonely, and she is craving connection, and she's craving healing this event that happened when she was a teenager and she wasn't able to keep the baby and her parents forced her to give it up. And um but also she doesn't have like the tools to go about that, right? Like she doesn't do it in a normal way. She creates the scholarship as a reason to connect with him without telling him who she really is. And she's like fumbling through in that scene, like She wants so badly for him to know, but she's also terrified for him to know. And she just wants to connect, but again, she doesn't know how to do it, and it's messy and complicated, and she kind of makes this decision impulsively without really thinking about how this is all going to play out down the line. And that just felt, God, like, so I felt like I had so much empathy for her reading that scene, of just, a person who is grasping at straws and really trying to figure out what's next for her, and how to bring these pieces of her life together in a way to grow and to change. And but again, like, she doesn't know how to do it. And that's just really sweet to me. And it kind of was the scene that made me fall in love with Birdie and her whole journey.
It also feels like with everything that happened with having to give her kid up for adoption when she was a teenager and everything with her parents, she kind of drops these like really traumatic one-liners throughout the episodes, and nobody ever asks any follow-up questions. And I was interested in how in depth it was helpful for you to go in terms of that backstory with her parents, because it feels like a lot of things stem from, if the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally don't, how does that set you up for the rest of your life?
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think Birdie's backstory is, I don't think she grew up with money. I think she grew up, on the quote other side of the tracks, and she maybe realized at a certain point that her looks, her confidence, her kind of sass, could grab the attention of affluent men. And she saw that as her way out. And she saw it as a way for her to build a life for herself away from the one she comes from, and to acquire wealth and power. And it's really about, I think, seeking independence from everything that's happened to her in the past. But when we meet her on the show, she kind of has all these, this big life, all this money, all this power, but she's lonely. She doesn't have any real friends. Like, her only real friend is her housekeeper, and and someone else that we'll meet. I think we do meet in the fourth episode, her ex-husband, Charlie. And yeah, and so in that way, also with her experience with her parents, is she doesn't have an example of what a good parent even is, or what they do, or what they should do. And so she wants to connect with her son, but she has no frame of reference of how to be a caring, loving, unconditional mom. She's kind of working on instinct, but she's very deprived of that. She's really like a survivor and has taken care of herself, I think, for a very long time. And so, whatever maternal I think we'll see throughout the series is like she does have some maternal instincts, and they're new for her, and she's sort of figuring out how to navigate them and this role. And again, like, she just doesn't have a frame of reference to like go back to, because she was, I think, treated very poorly by her own parents.
There's also that element of when she first comes into this world of the garden club, that she immediately calls out Catherine in front of the room full of people, and is like, "Oh, you're someone that likes to control other people because you can't control your own life." And did you find that there were a lot of moments where Birdie was almost trying to hurt other people before they had the opportunity to hurt her and say anything hurtful to her instead?
Oh yeah, I think that is she's so comfortable in that room, and that was so eye-opening to me. I was like, "Oh, she's been in so many rooms where she's had to command the space, right? Like, that's how she's gotten to where she is. Like, she's unapologetic, and she's, I think, a really good people reader, and can read a room, and like knows how to insert herself in a powerful position. And that's that like initial kind of butting heads with Catherine. But I think I love the way they've written the friendship between Catherine and Birdie, because I think she really sees Catherine not only as like, Catherine's the other person in the garden club that is from high society and status and power, and she understands those women in a different way than maybe Alice, who's not a part of that world. And I think the easy thing, the thing we see so much is like those two women, those two types of women being pitted against each other. And instead, Birdie is like, no, girl, like we're the same, like I've got your number, and you don't have to play those games with me. Like, and they form this unlikely friendship, which I love. And it's really, but you're right. I think it is a self-protection thing that she does. She knows she's not going to get hurt. She's going to do it to the others before they get to her.
Did you find that space and that trajectory of her guard coming down with Catherine quite naturally with Asia Naomi King and with the way that it was written? Because it's really beautiful to kind of watch her be disarmed in that way by someone in a friendship.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Asian Naomi King is such a talented actress. And when we did that scene that's in the pilot where she comes to the house to tell me that she's also in the affair with Gary, um, I, I remember doing that scene with Asia and like in certain takes, just finding myself watching her instead of acting with her, just being like, wow, she's such a beautiful performer. She's so good. Um, and so it was really easy. I love working with her. I love our scenes together. And like I said, so much was in the writing for us of this alliance that happens between these two women. Because I think the other interesting part about Birdie is sometimes women like that, I think, are written to be a little bit anti-woman, and she's really not. She really is like a feminist in a different way. And, she sees Catherine and she sees the whole situation for what it is. She cuts through the BS and she's like, I'm going to have your back. Like, this is what we're going to do. And it's a beautiful moment, and it continues to grow throughout the season. And Catherine really becomes like a true friend for her.
There's also that point where the two of them have that conversation about how they're being judged very differently for both having an affair with Gary. And Catherine is judged very harshly. And Betty kind of acknowledges, like, but people already view me this way. I think it's like I'm already in the dirt, and that's already how they view me. And did you kind of find that there were a lot of ways in which she's able to act out because people already expect it of her, and so they don't necessarily think anything of it half the time?
Yeah, I think that's definitely, we meet Birdie in the top of this show, like kind of at the lowest point of her life, having to do this community service, having been embarrassed in front of the whole town for being, drunk driving her car into the fountain and being a hot mess and being messy and kind of toxic. And so she's just like, okay, that's what you all think of me. Like, I'm just gonna run with it. What else do I have to lose? Like, she's already kind of the laughing stock of the town. And instead of shying away from that or being embarrassed, she's like, okay, you want me to be a mess? I'll be a mess. Like, she just sort of owns it. And, she's just very good at, I think, always asserting her power and not letting other people's opinions dictate how she views herself, in a way. And yeah, and she's just like, all right, like, yeah, I'm a mess. I'm a mess. I'm here at the garden club and I'm gardening and just watch what happens next, I guess.
And in terms of the storyline, obviously you've got the two different time points of, what's happening now and then what's happening 6 months down the line. And episode by episode, it feels like both of them are getting closer to the middle. And so how did you kind of like navigate and track for yourself having these two different trajectory points emotionally for the character? And then as you filmed throughout the season, getting to kind of coming closer and fill in the parts in the middle more.
Yeah, so the storylines they will converge once we get up to the episodes closer to the gala, and then it's sort of one timeline through the gala and the murder and everything that happens after. And I've just we're gonna start working on the episode that happens everything after, and it's brilliantly written. Um, Jenna and Bill like just knocked it out of the park. It's fills in all the gaps. So we will have seen so many bits and parts of that night. And then these episodes just fill in the gap and like so much more happens. And it's really fun. And it's so twisty and turny and and then it's fun to look back and go, oh, that's why like she was such a mess at this point, like because all this had happened before. And but yeah, going through the timeline thing was definitely challenging. We have an amazing script supervisor, and all of our directors have helped us a lot with reminding us, this happened after this, and when you shot this in this episode, and this is the moment before. And for me too, I've like kept little notes and stuff of the order of things and when what happened, but it's mentally has been a lot to track, especially emotionally, like where you are, there's different points of the night that are more intense than others, and just making sure we're hitting those emotional points throughout. But yeah, it's my first time working on a show with that element, and it's like you just got to do a lot of homework and make sure you're really tracking where you are in the story. And then for a long time, we didn't even know what the circumstance of the murder and who it was and why and all of that. And so that was really challenging as well. And because we sort of had to like for the pilot, we all the four of us kind of got together and we're like, all right, let's just like make something up so we all at least have the same thing in our minds, and the stakes can feel really high. And we were like crossing our fingers, it's like, I hope this makes sense down the line. And it does, and it did. So we're like, whoo, but we're in such good hands with Jenna Bands and Bill Krebs and our writers and our directors. And again, our script supervisor, Lisa, who's incredible. So we've had like a lot of support in making sure we're tracking everything really well.
And with the emotional tracking as well, there's obviously so much in terms of the dynamic with Joel, because when they first meet each other, they're completely antagonistic to each other. He's kind of threatening, I'm not afraid to use my position as an officer to completely ruin you and mess with you. And then we obviously see that they're incredibly connected later on. And so, how did you find those two juxtaposing sides and the way that you wanted to kind of emotionally pull those together?
Yeah, it was tricky because I knew we were eventually going to see how they sort of begin to fall in love, but we knew off the bat that with them there was this, it's sort of this magneticism. It's this, I know I shouldn't, but I really want to. And just playing that chemistry, playing that connection. And I think for me, it was that Joel is not the kind of man that Birdie usually is involved with, but she's really attracted to him, and I think she feels like he sees through the mask. He sees through the glam and the jewelry, and all the things that she presents to society, and really sees her, and that's incredibly disarming for her and new, because up until this point, she's just used to playing the trophy wife, playing she knows how to do that role, and to just be a person that someone is drawn to and wants to know and is attracted to is unsettling for her and kind of knocks her off her center. And so that's, it's leaning into that their connection is so strong, it's undeniable, even if they can't necessarily define what that connection even is yet.
And in talking about the costumes a little bit for Birdie, they're so wonderful in the way that Eric Damon, who's the costume designer, has kind of really told this story, looking at how she looks when she first shows up at the garden center and like her Louboutins and, just completely dressed to the nines inappropriately. And then she almost tries to like cosplay being a gardener in her own way. But I also, there's just those details of the jewelry that she wears, like the necklaces and the rings, that's like this armor for her every time she leaves the house. And so, how did you find that the costumes started to really shift and evolve for her and kind of tell a very specific story?
I'm so grateful that Eric Damon is our costume designer. He is a genius. He's so brilliant, and so much of Birdie just kind of came together and made sense for me when he on my first fitting, he was like, all right, she's gonna have the stack of necklaces she always wears, and she's always gonna have these rings, and like and it is. I was like, oh, it's an armor, it's a costume she puts on every day. This is how she hides her true self. And the clothes, yeah, we're doing a really fun journey in the garden of, it was like the day they gave me like these like jelly kind of boots to wear. They're like jelly shoes, but boots. I was like, oh, I was like, she's starting to get it now. We're out of heels. I was like, this is a big deal for Birdie, to be in a flat boot. Uh, and it also follows the same arc in the garden of her actually trying to learn about gardening and inserting herself more in the club and opening herself up a little bit more, and maybe becoming even a little more vulnerable in front of her new friends. And he just so brilliantly ties that into like the clothes that she chooses to wear and how she dresses for Ford. Like everything has a meaning and a purpose, and it's so specific, and it's just helps you as an actor when you work with someone like that. Like it informs your choices, it informs how you show up in the scene, it informs how you carry yourself in the scene. And I'm so grateful that he's our costume designers, especially for Birdie. It's so much of the exterior, it's so much of the surface. And she, I'm not like a fashion person. So I was like, really, I need help. Like, I really need someone who like knows what they're doing when it comes to fashion, because Birdie is that person. And he gave me that gift of, making it all make sense, and how what her style is, how she puts something together, and how she chooses what she wears, and when it's a little bit more profession, she's got a blazer, or she's like having more fun, or she's more relaxed. Yeah, it's just been such a gift. I love our fittings are so much fun.
I've also heard some of the other cast mention a gardening consultant that worked on the show, but I imagine for you it was a little bit less necessary because Birdie comes in without any skill sets and not knowing even what any of the gardening tools are.
I have the easiest job on this show when it comes to the gardening. Yeah, we do. We have this incredible consultant who is actually the mother-in-law of one of our ADs, Matthew Goodwin. She's like a master gardener, and so she's actually one of the background actors in the scenes. And she's there to just make sure it all sort of makes sense. But yeah, sometimes they'll send us a video if we're doing a specific thing in a scene, and I just kind of get to go, well, I don't have to watch that because Birdie doesn't know how to do that. So I'm going to be watching whoever's next to me in the scene and trying to learn what they're doing. And, it's made all my choices for Birdie in the gardening scenes like very easy and crystal clear.
And also with the flow of Birdie and how you get to play her, one of the things that's really fun and kind of part of the comedic space of her as a character on screen is the fact that she doesn't think about the consequences of her actions. She basically does things on an impulse and then starts to see the consequences play out. And so how has that created a very different rhythm to playing a character for you?
Yeah, I mean it's so fun, right? It's so fun and surprisingly empowering in a way to play a character that just says whatever she thinks and has no filter. And like you said, just, doesn't really think about the long-term consequences of her actions or her words. So it makes for really fun comedy in the sense that I don't have to try to make anything funny. It's the writing is really there for me, and the lines themselves can be so funny. And so I just have to sort of deliver the most honest version of it as Birdie. Whereas, if you're in a more traditional comedy, there might be a little bit more playfulness with levels and choices and stuff, but it's a little bit more kind of honed in and grounded with Birdie, because of her personality and the way these lines just sort of shoot out of her. And it's really fun. Like you just gotta be honest and say it, and it'll be funny. And and because she is larger than life, I do have a little more license, I think, than some of the other characters to give bigger versions of certain things, you know. Yeah.
It's so great. Well, I love everything that you've built into this character, and you know, the kind of like duality and vulnerability that really comes into play, I think is what makes it so special. So thank you so much, Melissa. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.